Hi everyone. So today is the last day, day 6. We're about through, and I hope you've all gotten some good information over this challenge. But today we're going to wrap everything up, and we're going to be talking about memorization and study skills. So over the course of this 6 days, almost a week, we've talked a lot about listening fatigue. How do we overcome listening fatigue? How do we increase focus? How do we make ourselves more alert? Concentrate better? That sort of thing. And today we're going to be talking about memorization. How, once we've gotten the information in our head and we understand it, how do we get that information to stick and stay in our brains for the long term? There's a few different ways that we can do that. Now, when I was in school, I struggled a lot with listening fatigue, and it was exhausting. And then when I would get home, I would need to study, but I would usually be so tired that I would force myself to study. But it was really basically, I was reading, but I wasn't processing any of it. And most of the information was going out. It wasn't staying where it needed to be. And then it was a struggle when I was going to take the test, because even though I had studied and had studied a lot, a lot of it wasn't being retained. So I had to develop some different study skills to help me. And the first one that I used that I really learned was mnemonics. And I have to give credit to the Irene Gold board reviews, which are for chiropractic boards, because they really taught me this. And so using mnemonics really allows you to create a phrase, and that's really what it is. Creating a phrase, a short phrase, that stands for a set of facts. So it's an association technique. Each word of the phrase stands for a particular fact, and so it really helps with like a certain list. When I had to memorize the cranial nerves, or you have to memorize the set of bones in the wrist. All of those, it's easier to memorize them if you have a little phrase, a little sentence, and you want it a little bit off the wall, a little bit wacky. So we were a bunch of 20s and 30-somethings in school, so obviously not all of our phrases were what one would call work appropriate, just because it's easier to remember when it is a little bit crazy and a little bit off the wall. And of course, when you're in your 20s, you tend to be a little bit crazier anyway. But like one of them that I learned in school was Randy Travis drinks cold beer. That's one of our milder ones. And that stood for a certain set of facts that I learned in anatomy lab. And it was actually Dr. Kathy Dooley, who is the anatomy lab tutor, that came up with that one. I don't know if she came up with that one, but she taught me that one. And it's just a really helpful way to kind of associate certain facts in your brain, because it's just a little phrase that so can trigger that memory of what you're trying to remember. So definitely, if you're studying, or if you need to know a series of facts for, say, your job or something, try creating a little mnemonic, something that's a bit quirky or something that has certain meaning for you, and it will make those facts and figures sometimes easier to remember. The other thing, some people like to use what's called memory palace. So if you're trying to memorize something, you create an imaginary house and put different details in each room of the house that will help create kind of a comprehensive memorization of certain amounts of information. And then you can also, like if you're trying to remember someone's name, you create a little phrase based on maybe something they wore or a certain characteristic or trait. This actually may be a little similar to what's called name signs in sign language. Name signs are a particular nickname that's given as a sign in American Sign Language that it's a nickname for a person. A lot of times it is based on their physical appearance or a characteristic that they have. So I'll move this up just a bit. Then when you're going home and when you're studying, you want to be able to use certain senses to help you memorize. Use parts of your body to help you memorize. And the biggest one, obviously, is using our 5 senses, in particular, taste and smell. Because a lot of times these have an emotional component. And I think about you're walking into the house and you smell fresh baked cookies and it reminds you of your mom, it reminds you of your grandmother. You taste something and it brings you back to the memory of your first date when you went out to dinner with someone, or the first time you met your best friend and you went and got ice cream together. And these are like stored memories. So you're not actively thinking about them all the time, but they're emotional memories that are stored deep inside of you. And then when those senses are activated and it reminds you of that time, then that memory comes up and you may get that sense of what's called deja vu. So using your senses can be an important way of triggering the memories of what you learned. And you can do that by using senses when you're studying. So if you want to do taste, pop in a breath mint when you're studying, and then put in the same breath mint when you go to take your test, or a little bit of spritz of perfume, even if it's not on you, but spraying something and then having that while you're studying, and then having that same scent with you when you go to study. It can help remind you of the time when you go to take your test, that smelling that scent or tasting that particular taste can help you remind you of when you were studying, and then it can help, hopefully, help you remember what you were studying and the material that you needed to learn. Then exercise, also I touched on exercise a bit yesterday. It brings blood to the brain, and the movement of it can help you remember what you learned. And then lastly, sleep. Why sleep? Because as we sleep, our brain is undergoing a cleaning process. So the rest of us may be, still and quiet, but that is time when our brain is very active, not only with dreaming, but also with cleaning. It gets rid of all the debris, anything, and it also moves memories from short-term storage to long-term storage. So memories are made in the hippocampus, especially emotional memories, which are made in the amygdala, your fear center, your fight or flight. But active memories are made in the hippocampus. And these are short-term memories. That's your short-term storage. And as you sleep, the hippocampus starts the process of moving memories from that short-term storage space into long-term storage in the cortex of the brain. So if you study and then you sleep, whether it's taking a nap or whether you're studying right before you're going to bed, it can help move that information from short-term storage into long-term storage, making it easier for you to remember when you go to take a test. So, yeah, there we are, day 6, and that's the last of the information. And I hope you all got a lot out of it. And I appreciate all of you being with me. And yeah, feel free, comments, questions, but try some of these memorization and study skills and see how they help. All right? I'll talk to you all later. Bye.